The next session will be starting now. 10 Things We Know to Be True, a behind-the-scenes look at Google Data Center financial and operational efficiencies with Joe Cava from Google.
Is this working now? Better. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Joe Cava. I have the privilege of representing a lot of work that was done by many, many smart people on our teams, all of which are much smarter than me, and it's really them that deserve the credit. So all of our technologists, engineers, and operations professionals really are what made this happen. I suspect that many of you may have seen the new photo site that we went live with last year that had all the beautiful pictures of the data centers. And some of you may have even taken the street view tour through our data center in Lenoir, North Carolina. So I thought that I would give you a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look at really what drove us to put out the photo site that we did. And also I wanted to take an opportunity to talk about the 10 things that we know to be true. These are lessons learned, and really these were written by Larry and Sergey back when the company was founded. And they've been our guiding principles that have helped us develop sustainable, cost-efficient, and very scalable compute infrastructure. So with that, I'd like to start with a little bit of a history tour. We started out in co-locations, just like probably many of your companies, you have colos, and we realized pretty soon that in order to keep scaling at our level, and in order to make it cost effective, we were gonna have to build and operate our own data centers. So our first real, kind of ground up effort was our containerized data center in 2005. This was put into a facility that we had leased. These containers were the result of about a year's worth of work by the engineers on our development teams. And this was truly a containerized solution. So we've deployed many dozens of these in that data center. And we've been continuing to evolve the idea of containerized, modular, scalable infrastructure. And that led to our first ground-up greenfield data center site, which was in 2006. That was in the Dalles, Oregon. And this was really a ground-up effort, designing and building a purpose-built data center for Google's needs. This probably wouldn't meet the needs of many of your companies, but for our needs, it was our first ground-up effort. In 2007, we were deploying our infrastructure in both North and South Carolina, and this is when we really started to embrace the supply chain optimization, and really looking at what could be manufactured off-site, what could be modularized, what could be prefabricated and then brought to the site for the purposes of quality control, for cost reduction, and for speed of deployment. So we really focused on optimizing the supply chain, and that was beginning back in the 2007 timeframe. 2008 is when we released our PUE and our PUE best practices. And at the time, PUE as a defined metric had been in existence for about a year, if I'm right, John. And when we released our PUE, I remember that there was a lot of questioning about, is this really possible? Because I think when we did our first announcement, it was something like 1.24 was our global average PUE. And at the time, everyone was saying, well, is that really possible? Maybe you made a mistake, your calculations might be wrong. But as we released the data behind it and the calculation methodology and the best practices, how we got there, it became, I think, kind of one of the spearheads for the industry to start thinking about, what, this really is possible. And it's so rewarding to see so many new data center designs today that are coming out at 1.1, 1.09, PUE design basis. So that's just tremendous. The industry has done, I think, a great job. There's more work to do, and I'll talk about some of the challenges that are still there later on. But we started to be transparent with our methodologies at that point. And in 2009, we hosted our first Data Center Efficiency Summit, where we invited industry folks, members of the press, as well as colleagues from around the various different user groups. to come and share best practices about data center efficiency. And we repeated that in Europe in 2011 in Zurich. And all of that content is published on our websites, so those case studies are available still today. In 2010, we released a lot of our renewable energy efforts. We released publicly what we had been doing in that regard. To date, we've contracted more than 260 megawatts of renewable energy. We had signed long-term power purchase agreements in Iowa and Oklahoma, and that was today we've committed more than $1 billion to renewable energy to power our data centers. Today, we're about 33%, give or take 1 or 2%, renewable energy across our entire enterprise. Our objective is to be 100%. So we have a lot of work to do, but when you go out and you look for really reliable, available, cost-effective renewable energy on the public grids, it's a little bit hard to find. So I'll talk a little bit more about our strategy with respect to that as well. And then 2011, we wanted to subject ourselves to public scrutiny and subject ourselves to independent third-party certifications about our environmental and our workplace and employee safety standards. So we started our efforts to become ISO 14000 and OSAS 18000 certified. And in 2011, we completed all the US sites. The end of last year, we completed certifications for all of our European sites. And all of our sites around the world, as they come up into production, will continue this trend. So a little bit of a kind of a tour through history, which led us to last year when we decided to kind of open the curtains a little bit more and show some of the infrastructure and a little bit more about the scale and some of the operational lessons learned from our data centers. So we released this beautiful picture website. It's titled Where the Internet Lives, and it can be found at google.com/datacenters. But really this highlights the technology, the people, and the places. And we also did a little bit of an expose behind one of the technologies that we developed and how it helps us to develop these sustainable, cost-effective, efficient, and scalable infrastructure. So, I'm coming up on my 5-year anniversary at Google. So I started to reflect back about what things were like when I got to Google, what it's like now, what have we done right, what are the opportunities that we're still not doing well enough. And I kept reflecting back on one of the things that I learned during the first week at Google, which is the 10 things we know to be true. This is the list that Larry and Sergey developed when they first founded the company. And they developed this to be the guiding principles of how we want to run and grow our business. And I'm scrolling through these quickly here, but the idea is that we wanted to have a set of guiding principles to run our company by. So I started reflecting back on this, and I said, have we been true in our data center group and our construction programs and our operations teams? Have we been true to these guiding principles? And so I decided to show you what I think we've been doing and how we've been doing and how we've stacked up against what Larry and Sergey published to be what they know to be true. So focus on the user and all else will follow. It's best to do one thing really well. You can be serious without a suit, which I guess begs the question, why am I wearing a suit? And I'm gonna have to change quickly back to jeans and a t-shirt before someone thinks I was abducted by IBM or something. But the need for information crosses all borders. You don't have to be at your desk to need an answer. Fast is better than slow. Great just isn't good enough. There's always more information out there. You can make money without doing evil, and democracy on the web works. So 1, focus on the user and all else will follow. Today, our global scale. Our web index has over 30 trillion unique URLs indexed. 5 years ago when I started, that number was 30 times less. There was 1 trillion. In 5 years, the index has grown 30 times. We perform and we serve over 100 billion search queries every month. That's 3 billion a day. When you take out your phone and you do a voice search on what is the population of Paris, France, and it responds back that there's 2.2 million people in Paris, France as of 2009. And I know that because the young lady from the French news that was interviewing me yesterday I did that, and it tells me that there's 2.2 million people in Paris, France. That happens in a fraction of a second. And I would argue that the most powerful computing in your entire infrastructure, the most powerful computer in your entire environment, is the one that you're carrying around in your pocket right now. Because by doing that voice search, I sent that search to one of our data centers across our backbone, spun up probably around 1,000 servers to scan the index, aggregate the data back, send it back over. I got that in less than a half a second back to my phone. I don't know any other single computer in your environment that can do that quickly. So this is the face of computing going forward. And this is, I think, one of the most powerful instruments that we have at our fingertips. We have over 425 million active Gmail users, and 5 million businesses are using Google Apps to run their companies. So on a global scale, those are pretty big numbers. And really that came from focusing on what it's going to be good for the users, focusing on the speed, the efficiency, the simplicity, and then things will happen. The business will follow if you focus on the users. So lesson number one. And with that, after we've offset our carbon emissions, 0, meaning that we're 100% carbon neutral. We have been since 2007. We follow a 3-part strategy to get there. I talk about that a little bit later on. But one, it's really to reduce our consumption. The best savings is the energy that you don't use in the first place. 2, to buy renewable energies to the greatest extent possible. And 3, to purchase high quality carbon offsets to offset the rest of our footprint. We'll talk about that later, but since 2007, we have been carbon neutral. So number 2, it's best to do one thing really, really well. Well, in our teams, we build data centers. And so we focus on building data centers for Google, not for co-locations, not for other enterprise companies, because those answers would be different than what the right answer for Google is. But we try and focus on what is right, and we try and do that really, really well for Google. This is an overview of our site in North Carolina. This is one of the things that we try and think about is that this is not a short-term investment strategy for us. This is not a once-and-done type deal. And if you think about this as a long-term development activity over the next decade or more, what would you change today if your vision was 10 times what it might be today? One of the things you would do is probably pre-position a lot of your long lead time utilities, pre-position maybe some shells that generally low cost goes into the building shell. They don't change that much, but leave them available. Put the hooks in there for future technologies so that you can deploy faster, can deploy more cost effectively in the future. So when we do site selection, there's a lot that goes into it. Of course, the big component is the makeup of the grid, the renewable energy content on the grid. That's a big part of our site selection, but there's also many other things. The workforce availability, the proximity to large user populations so that we can have excellent performance to those large user populations, cost effectiveness in the area, many things that go into the site selection, just like with yours. But we always look at this from the future. What's going to be happening in 10 years? So how much are we going to need? And what should we be doing today to pre-position that later? The other benefit of doing this is that you really can form long-standing, lasting relationships with your utility companies when you're talking about a vision of multiple 10, 20-year type vision. That's super important because all of our utility companies know that we want more renewable energy on the grid. Our desire is to be able to buy 100% renewable energy. We can't today. They know that's our desire, and we are a customer, and customers have loud voices, and so over years you can form those relationships with your utility companies and think about how we can, as a customer, influence their production and what we can do to get more renewables onto the grid. Oops, I'm sorry, wrong way. So as I mentioned, really we look at this with an eye from time to market, speed of execution, pre-positioning a site for the long term so that it can scale with the demand as our user base grows. These are purpose-built facilities, which means they're not pretty. There's no beautiful facade on these buildings. There's no fancy entrances, no marble on the floors like you might find in a financial institution in New York. They're not beautiful on the outside, but we think they're beautiful on the inside. They're really industrial plants. They're warehouses filled with computers. That's what they are. And so we design and build them to be the most scalable, most efficient, most sustainable that we can. And we don't really care about the aesthetics. This is a picture from our site in Iowa. As you can tell, these are large-scale facilities. They look like industrial plants, but we focused on how do we do that efficiently, cost-effectively, scalable, and sustainable. And you'll see that all of those modules are, our design is really designed around a predetermined modular size. And then using lessons learned from, large-scale manufacturing environments, even auto manufacturing, where they'll set up a line and then just repeat lines to get more volume. This is built around a common design architecture and then just repeated all the way down the data center. So that leads to speed, simplicity of operations, cost effectiveness, and by continually working to work with our vendors and our partners, we really try and make them very sustainable operations as well. So you can be serious without a suit. This gets to our culture. And really, this is from one of our data centers. The teams that are going to be operating the data centers, and these teams are comprised of almost 1,000 individuals today of Googlers and our contract partners that are operating our worldwide fleet of data centers. It's super important to us that they feel connected back to Google Corporation, back to Google headquarters in Mountain View. So we try and simulate the same type of environment that we have in Mountain View, which is an environment where you work hard and you can play hard too. You can have fun, you can be serious, do really good work. You don't have to wear a suit. That comes in handy when the data center is also about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. You can wear shorts and a t-shirt. So we also allow the teams that are going to be operating the data centers, we empower them to select how they want, what the theme of that facility is going to be, how they want to fit out the data center, what amenities they want. So it gives them a sense of ownership, and I'll tell you, no matter where I go, any one of our data centers in the world, you go in there and these are some of the cleanest data center facilities, even in the pump rooms, even in the generator enclosures. These facilities are clean because our teams treat them like they were their own house. They treat them like they're their own property. They have that pride and ownership, and it also leads to operational efficiencies. You can tell if a pump is leaking and if a seal is bad because there's a drip of oil or grease coming down the side. If that wasn't clean, you probably wouldn't see that. You lose an opportunity to head off an inefficiency by not having a clean operation. So it just really goes to having a sense of pride, of ownership, and that's how all of the facilities are run. We also really empower our operations staff a lot. And a lot of people talk about that, but we also put our money behind it. We have an incentive program for innovation, because I believe that even running a facility day in and day out, there's ways to innovate and ways to find efficiencies. Even going from a PUE of 1.24 when we started, 5 years ago, that's what it was. Today, the global PUE is less than 1.12. No one thought that that was possible back then. But we challenged the teams, we challenged our engineers and operating professionals to find better, more efficient ways of running those facilities, and they did. So once again, really empower your staff, put some rewards around it. Give them the opportunity to think creatively and to come up with those ideas that would otherwise just be left unsaid. One of those ideas was, this is a case study that we published. When we built some of our big networking rooms around our company, we made a mistake. And we designed it to be ultra reliable, because even if the data center has some problems, you want the network traffic still passing through that node. So the networking room is at a much higher resiliency than the rest of the data center infrastructure. So we got exactly what we wanted. We got a really ultra available, high resiliency facility that had a crappy PUE. We had a PUE of about 2.4 in these facilities when we got around to measuring it. We hadn't really been measuring it up until then because it's very, very small load, very small workload in these networking rooms. And so it just wasn't No one was paying attention. So we said, okay, this isn't good. Now it's time to pay attention. What can we do? Can't take them offline. Can't do a complete retrofit. But what we could do is some simple things that we know are the right best practices. Plastic meat locker curtains. They're cheap. They're really effective. Anyhow, we've got those down to where they're all running below 1.5 today. And it costs like $25,000 retrofit on each one of these. So it's like next to nothing. But these came out of the innovative ideas of our employees because they were encouraged to do the things that matter, to keep learning, and to find a cost-effective, simple solution to the problem. Another big advantage is that organizational structure really does matter. When Dean and his team from eBay were up here, and they were talking about, you have data center and software and finance all together, that's exactly the way we've been structured. We were fortunate that we're a company that's only 14 years old. We didn't have a lot of legacy, a lot of corporate legacy and corporate structure to drag around with us. So when we started, we formed the organization so that our head of technical infrastructure, he's a guy who doesn't wear suits, he wears red socks. He has all of the end-to-end infrastructure under his organization. So the guy that is writing the checks for the infrastructure and the operations is the same one that is specifying the IT equipment, meaning the servers and storage arrays, and the same one that is, has the financial responsibility to the company for the profitability or the cost effectiveness of that infrastructure, and the operational uptime and availability as well. So organizational structure really does incentivize the right behaviors. I know that's tough, but it really, really does matter. And if there's one key takeaway, let's stop talking about IT and facilities working together, and let's start organizing them so that they do work together. Okay, the need for information crosses all borders. Clearly, that's the cloud, right? This is inside one of our data centers. I think this is in Iowa also. From the beginning, when we started to do our own data centers, we saw the vision of, Google's going to be pretty big one day. And we're going to want to serve a distributed user base. And we're going to want to do that in a very cost-effective manner. And we don't want to spend a lot of additional money on ultra-high availability and reliability at that individual site. Let's build that redundancy and that resiliency into the software. Let's build a cloud. So right from the beginning, we were starting to think about cloud computing and what that was going to eventually be. So from day one, I said that we really designed and architected our infrastructure to be cloud ready. And it also helps, quite frankly, is that we control the stack. We design and build our own servers. We design and build our own storage arrays. We design and write the software that runs on them. We operate our data centers. We design and build the data centers. So when you really control that stack, you can make the trade-offs. And the gentleman right before me over in the other presentation was talking about trade-offs and what you have to consider. And really, you can make the right trade-offs. Is it better to invest this in software resiliency or physical redundancy? You can make those trade-offs, and this was the right solution for Google. It may not be the right solution for everyone because we all have constraints and we have business needs to operate within. Get that. Picture from the Dows. But really, one of the other things is that when you're operating a big cloud, you can do that in an environmentally sensitive and environmentally responsible and sustainable way. Like I said, our sustainability strategy is to, one, reduce, that's PUE. The data centers are the overwhelming majority footprint in Google's total carbon footprint. And Google's total carbon footprint is published. It is every year we disclose to the Carbon Disclosure Project, and we're at like 1.68 million tons of carbon in the end of 2011. Our 2012 numbers are just being finalized, but those will be disclosed and reported as well. So the biggest opportunity was, what can we do with the data centers to drive down that total carbon footprint? And that's where PUE became such an intense focus for us. Such relentless pursuit of innovation and improvement so that we can drive down that total demand on that energy demand. Okay, you don't need to be at your desk to need an answer. Clearly, All of us are here today, and we're all probably looking for answers all the time. This is the data center in Finland. One of the things that we push the teams to do is to maximize the effective use of that data center space. Because if you're trying to serve a worldwide user base, and you're trying to do that in a cloud environment, you need to utilize your facilities really efficiently also. So in this case, this was a paper mill that we bought. It was built in the 1950s. This building was about 100 feet tall from floor to the ceiling infrastructure, and several hundred feet long. So if you just put in a row of servers on the ground floor there, that's not a great use of the space. So we built a mezzanine. We divided it in two, and we have 2 layers of server floor in this building. This happens to be the upper floor. So you have to, once again, think about how you're going to maximize the efficiency and the utilization of not only the servers, but the physical space as well. Can you reuse? Most of the infrastructure in this facility was completely reused. The building itself was reused. The electrical distribution on site for the paper mill was reused. A lot of the medium voltage gear was all reused and reconditioned. A lot of the pumps that we use for the seawater cooling were all reused. So, work with what you have, but maximize the use of that and maximize the reuse of those really precious materials as well. Fast is better than slow. So I'm trying to go fast in this presentation. We needed to scale really quickly. By the time we started our data center program in 2005, doing it ourselves instead of just going into colo space, we were already behind the curve. We already couldn't find enough colo space for the right price. We already knew that our user demand was way outpacing our capacity and our supply. So we had to do it quickly. Once again, this gets into prefabrication, modular deployments. All of these cooling modules that you see here were mostly constructed off-site and then just brought onto the site and fitted together. This led to really, really fast deployment. It led to a lot less mistakes and errors in the field. Quality was better. So this is an example of a decentralized plant where all of these cooling modules were, like I said, designed and built off-site and then just come and deployed. This is an example of a facility in Georgia, a large-scale facility. Normally a project of this size, being a stick build from the ground up, this would be something on the order of 2 to 3 years. This was done in 16 months. It was done that way because, one, we took advantage of a pre-existing building shell. There was this warehouse. It was going to be a trucking distribution warehouse. It was being built for that. We were able to go in and buy it early enough to where we could make some small changes in the design and get it built with a few changes in mind just for load bearing and things like that to be a data center instead of a distribution warehouse. So that took the permitting cycle and the design cycle basically out of the equation. Next, prefabrication, modular deployment. Take all of that and get your supply chain working in parallel with your construction operations. These happen to be a central plant design. So we have central large cooling plants on both the north and the south side of the building. But not only was it done in pretty great time, 16 months, but it was done extremely cost effectively at that time also by just employing all these lessons that I've been talking about. 16 months might be good, but the next challenge for the team is how do you do it in 6 months? Or how do you do it in 1.6 months? How do you get 10x out of that cycle? Because if we can do that next, think about not only effective use of capital, which all of us in business are very concerned with, but think about the effective utilization of your IT and compute infrastructure. If you can deploy it just in time because you've driven down the cycle time, instead of having those servers on the floor idle for 3 or 4 months waiting for them to be put into production. How about they're idle for 3 or 4 hours before they're put into production? This is the next revolution that we really have to get to. So we do some things to think about fast deployments and to think about fast repairs and to think about fast refactor and refresh of these servers. The racks. Our racks are, once again, not pretty, but they're all standardized. They can accept any of our IT generations in the same rack. So we can go and do refreshes, server refreshes very quickly. With thousands of servers in every data center, you have constant repairs going on. Disk drives break, memory needs to be upgraded or replaced, CPUs have to be replaced. We have to make it very serviceable. All of these are serviceable from the front side. All the trays slide out. The hardware operations techs can get to them quickly, take them, repair them, replace them, get them back into production, utilize those assets to the maximum possible. Okay? Great just isn't good enough. We think that we've had some pretty great designs over the years. But with every new data center, we start really from scratch. We start from a blank page and say, what can we redeploy? What can we reuse? But what is the right solution for that specific environment? We don't just copy exactly the same thing over and over again. We also build in some future proofing. When you're building a data center like this, and just one example, on the bus ducts, the power distribution busways up there, the bus tap boxes. Well, today for every so many racks of equipment, you only need a couple of those, but they're cheap to put in and they're easy to put in before it's energized, so we put in extras. Because I don't know what tomorrow's generation of servers is going to require. I don't know if the form factor is going to be smaller and I can cram more racks into one row. I want to have that future proofing, and the cost of doing that is very, very, very small when you do it up front in construction. The cost of taking down that row and adding new bus plugs in there is very high to the business. So think about, how do you future proof? How do you look at what might be, and what can you do now? What hooks can you put into your designs now to make them great for the future also, no matter how good it is for what today has? Right, talking about flexibility, and we make these decisions with a complete TCO model. We don't make it based on first cost, we make it based on total cost. So operations are included in that equation. Life cycle, refreshes, refactors of the equipment, serviceability, design for availability, design for serviceability. These are all inputs that go into our TCO model. An example. This is a picture of one of our air-cooled modules in Dublin, Ireland. Even as good as the designs were for North Carolina or for Iowa, in Dublin, completely different environment. So we don't need chillers. Maybe we don't even need water cooling. So it's 100% outside air-cooled data center. So the geography makes a difference. Customize the solution to the natural environment as opposing to force fit a predetermined design to every environment. In Finland, perfect example. This is that paper mill that I was talking about. Didn't look much like a data center when we bought it, and you kind of had to walk around with your I believe hat on and imagine what this will look like. But if anyone's been in a paper mill, maybe not too many people, but they're very dirty. The equipment is very large, very noisy, very greasy, very grimy, and not at all what you see a data center in your mind when you think of a data center. But if you look beyond that, they use a lot of power. Well, data centers need a lot of power. They have a lot of physical infrastructure. Data centers need resilient physical infrastructure. They need a lot of cooling for their power and cogen. Data centers need cooling. In this case, this one happened to be right on the Gulf of Finland. If you look in the background there, all that white, lovely snow is the frozen Gulf of Finland. So why not do a seawater-cooled data center? Well, that's what we did. We had the teams kind of challenge the convention, and they reused all of that seawater cooling infrastructure, and we built seawater cooling plant to cool the entire data center. So no compressor-based cooling, no chillers, no AC, 100% seawater cooled. Okay, so there's always more information out there. This is one example of a little bit of a deep dive into one of the technical innovations. Everyone recognizes this, right? This is a traditional data center. We all know the problems with this. Poor isolation of hot aisle and cold aisle. You get mixing of the cold air with the warm return air. You're discharging probably directly into some crack units, so the cracks are fighting each other, dehumidifying and humidifying and cooling and not cooling. Everyone knows all the problems, right? So we said, what's a better way of doing this? Challenge the team to think of a better mousetrap. that led to this innovation. What you're looking at is inside the row of one of our in-row cooling units, looking right down the middle of the row. All those little circles on both sides of the row, those are the server fans. Inside, it's a hot aisle containment. Remember, our servers are serviceable from the front so that you can work in the cool aisle. Cool is a relative term, like I said. You're comfortable working in shorts and a t-shirt in one of our data centers. But that means that one, you can run things a little bit hotter. Two, with the hot aisle completely contained and captured, you get much higher delta T across your fan coils. Up at the top of this, you see the flat planar structure at the top. That's where our fan coils are. So the stainless braided lines here bring the process water to the fan coils up top. All the hot air goes immediately to the fan coils, gets reduced in temperature and exhausted to the ballroom, the data center. So we don't have a traditional cold aisle distribution. We have an ambient environment, and the hot aisle is contained and captured, and all the hot air goes directly to the fan coils. And instead of trying to move that hot air meters or many meters away to the crack unit, we brought the cooling, the crack unit, if you will, to the servers. So these units are called hot huts, and we've released a white paper on these as well. So in order to get to that solution, you had to start thinking about, okay, well, what are the first principles you're solving for? Is moving water more efficient than moving air for cooling? Well, if you go and you do your research, you find out that the specific heat capacity and the thermal conductivity of water is far and away greater than air. Okay, so what about the energy cost of getting that water to the servers? Well, are pumps more efficient than fans? So you start looking at a pump curve, and in general, a fan moving large volumes of air at a relatively high speed run about in the 60% efficiency range, where the same applicable pump runs at about 70% efficiency range on the curve. So if you just translate that to a normalized load of, say, you wanted to cool 10 megawatts, how much fan energy and how much pump energy would be required? You can see the numbers here, but it's almost 4 times less energy required to move the water than it is to move the air to cool that 10 megawatt IT load. So we decided to use water cooling, but we wanted to bring the water to the servers, or as close to the servers as we thought was efficient at that time, as opposed to moving that air all the way to where the water in those chilled water cracks are. This is some of the iterations that we've gone through along the way. That picture that I showed you looking down the row in that hot aisle containment, that's the 5th generation of these. So we've been only doing them ourselves for about 6 years. We're on the 5th generation. That's constant attention to innovation and improvement and challenging that even if you think you have something good, there's still a better way to do it. And make decisions based on a complete TCO model. Don't be stuck in saying, okay, well, we've got that today. We always have to have that. Okay, so we've chosen water side economization for most of our data centers. What are you going to do about water? How does that fit into your sustainability program? This is a picture from Belgium where we have the water storage tanks directly under the cooling towers, so that we're making the condensed water, keeping those storage tanks to use and inject into our process water loop, or through the heat exchangers rather. However, that wasn't the most efficient way, so Gen 2 was large centralized storage tanks that are much more thermally insulated, so that we can retain that coolish water better. You also have filtration. If you're using water, you have chemical treatment, you also have filtration. In this case, this is a pre-manufactured skid that we put directly under the cooling towers so that we can filter directly under, use a lot of gravity feed. So you don't have to use a lot of pump energy also. There's pumps, of course, because you still have to move the water, but try and plan and lay things out for the most effective and efficient infrastructure. This is a picture from Oregon. Oregon is an example of a central utility plant, central cooling plant. In all of our designs, we use free cooling to the greatest extent possible. So in this case, it means that the heat exchangers that you see are doing all the work, except for the very few hours during the peak months that we need chillers, and then we just use the chillers to inject cool water to keep it at our requirements. But most of the time, we're running in just full waterside economize mode, using the cooling towers for 100% of the cooling need. Okay, you can make money without doing evil. Brings us back to water sources, right? How are we not being evil? How are we trying to be responsible citizens for the environment? And how are we trying to have a truly sustainable IT infrastructure? So one is we try and use reclaimed water a lot. In Atlanta, that big facility that I showed you, we worked with the county, and we went to their water treatment plant, and we designed and had built for us a spur line that we redirect about 30% of the black water output from the county wastewater treatment plant to our own water treatment plant, where it's processed and treated just good enough for industrial use, not potable. That is then pumped to our site, where we use it for the makeup in the cooling towers. And then on the return, on the blowdown, instead of just blowing down directly to the sewer, we built an effluent treatment plant right on site. This is that effluent treatment plant you're looking at right now inside. So the water is now treated to where it's clean enough you can release it directly to a nearby stream that takes it to the Chattahoochee River. So we're not using any potable water. We're using 100% gray water from the city. We're not taxing the county sewer system. We're cleaning it ourselves, and we're depositing it right into the stream, all subject to all the correct environmental regulations and permits, subject to third-party independent auditors. And by the way, we're discharging the water to the river much cleaner than the county water treatment plant discharges it as well. In Belgium, there is an industrial shipping canal only a few hundred meters away from the site. So great water source, not potable, really dirty, because ships are running in it all day long. There's a lot of hydrocarbons in the water, a lot of floating debris. We built our own water treatment plant there too. Clean up the hydrocarbons, filter the water, make it good enough for industrial use. I'm not trying to create drinking water, I'm just trying to create industrial use water. And then we use that for 100% of the makeup water requirements for the cooling towers. This site has 0 chillers. This is a 100% chillerless site. So 100% of the cooling is done by waterside economization. 100% of the water comes from that industrial shipping canal. In Finland, we talked about seawater cooling. There was this seawater tunnel already existing, carved out of solid granite right under the whole site. So we thought, okay, can we use that seawater for cooling? There's challenges that come with seawater. Corrosion is the first one that comes to mind, right? So on the left side of this picture, all the grayish, kind of greenish pipes, all of those are fiberglass reinforced pipe, non-corrosion problem. All the colored pipes, the painted pipes, all of those are traditional mild steel pipes, because that's the treated water on that side of the heat exchanger. Only heat exchangers. Those are seawater rated heat exchangers with titanium plates. Those are off the shelf. You can buy those. I didn't know that, but you can. So seawater cooling is actually used in a lot of industries. Just hadn't seen many applications in data centers, so we said, why not? We have this natural resource, let's do it. And by the way, you can also treat that water before you release it back to the ocean so that it goes back at a very similar temperature to what you took it out at. How did we do that? We built a tempering plant right on the discharge. No pump needed. You just take a spur line from the tunnel, and the discharge creates a Venturi effect and sucks in cold water from the sea and mixes it before you discharge it, so you're discharging at a much more similar temperature, so you don't have to be harmful to the environment and potentially cause environmental damage by discharging hot water also. We're working a lot of experimentation with stormwater capture. A lot of our sites, you have to build retention ponds, when you're developing these large multi-hundred acre sites. So there's a lot of water available, but it's pretty dirty. So how do we filter it? How do we treat it properly to use it? We're working on a lot of that. And this happens to be in South Carolina. So we've been doing stormwater testing for quite a while there. No water. In certain environments, you can use 100% outside air cooling. This happens to be a picture from the facility we just built last year in Dublin, 100% outside air cooled. no water, very little water, right? There's a little bit of water used for humidification, but beyond that, there's no water used for cooling. Okay, democracy on the web works. I gotta come clean. I couldn't think of a picture to go with this one, so I'm just gonna say that this is self-evident, and, and 9 out of 10 ain't too bad. So let me end with some parting thoughts. This is Gartner data, right? And it categorizes the IT into 5 kind of buckets by size. You have the single server closets on the far left. You've got kind of several rack computer rooms next, and then a mid-sized data center next. And then you've got enterprise, largest size data centers, and then you've got the large cloud type environments. And you can look at the population, how those have been growing over time in each one of those buckets. So then our team, our engineers, assigned PUE numbers, and these are relative numbers, right? But you probably agree that those single server closets are probably greater than 2.5 PUE in general, going all the way up to the very large cloud computing environments, which are regularly running at 1.1 now. So you've got that spectrum or that continuum of efficiency across those different compute environments. The problem is that the large enterprise, efficient, and cloud computing facilities have been growing, but the very small ones have been growing too. That's the problem, and unfortunately, there's way, way, way more of those very small ones than there are the large facilities. So they make up a much larger portion of the consumed energy worldwide for ICT computing. This is a problem that we can solve because those are the prime opportunities for moving that infrastructure, those small startup businesses. They can start from a cloud-based environment right from the beginning and take advantage of the work that's being done by the people that are designing and operating these facilities at the far right of that spectrum. So really, I've heard this from eBay. I heard it from one of the other presentations this morning. You have to have a complete holistic strategy for your data centers. Data centers only exist to enable and power the business. So what are your business transactions? As Dean said from the eBay presentation this morning, they buy and they sell. At eBay, that's what they power. Everything else is a cost adder to one of those 2 business transactions. So what is your strategy? What are your business drivers? And how does that tie into your sustainability programs? Can you design your infrastructure? Can you operate your infrastructure? Can you create and operate your software stack aligned with a holistic, sustainable energy strategy? You have to have an efficient data center strategy, right? And efficient means efficient use of space, efficient use of the compute infrastructure, highly utilized compute infrastructure, as opposed to those 1,000 servers that are running at 1% utilization. This is not a unique problem. All of us have those types of problems. So all of us need to have this as a fundamental strategy that we work to. And of course, right, we all have to be good, fiscally responsible with our company's money also. So what is our overall cost efficiency strategy? So really you have to think about it in terms of performance, in terms of sustainability, in terms of efficiency and cost effectiveness. You have to have that complete strategy, and it's different for all of us. Every one of you has a different strategy because you can't say, well, that worked for them, so it must work for us. All of our businesses are different. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning, and I think we have a few minutes for questions.
That's excellent. Thanks for all the transparency. It's very useful for the rest of us. One question is around justifications. So clearly there's lots of justifications for what you're doing. A lot of companies tends to be around financial savings and ROI and payback periods and that sort of thing. I know there's obviously things like risk and your markets and your consumers satisfying their customer requirements. Can you speak to, other than financial ROI, because a lot of places it's cheap energy, cheap water, so that's, a lot of times you can't find
example,
ROIs.
right?
So what are you using to justify projects like that?
So if you look at your balance sheet today, water doesn't show up anywhere on your balance sheet. It's just cheap. It's way too cheap, frankly. If it were more expensive, we would probably be thinking about it a little bit differently. When gasoline was $1 a gallon, we didn't really think about taking that drive down to the store to do that. Today at $4 or $4.50 a gallon, we maybe consider about how I can consolidate my trips and maybe, take the bike instead of taking the car. So I think that you have to look at it from not just what it's costing today, but what if water were 10 or 100 times more expensive? More importantly, what if water were a constrained resource? And I posit that actually fresh water is going to be a constrained resource. It is going to be the next oil. There are going to be huge, huge challenges around meeting the potable water demands for a growing population worldwide. And we need to start thinking about that today. So if you think about it only for, I need to have a 5-year ROI on this project, I can tell you that my effluent treatment plant, the ROI was much longer than 5 years. There was still net positive payback, but over a period that you would normally not consider attractive. But if you think about it in broader sense, what about for availability? What about what if water weren't available at that data center and you had to shut the data center down? How much of a business impact would that be? Now that's astronomical. But if you're using gray water and you're treating it yourself and you're not reliant on the county potable water supply, that even during drought periods, there's still plenty of gray water coming out of those water treatment plants. So you're giving yourself actually business continuity. And that has to be worth something on the balance sheet also, right? So people have to think about this, I think, a little bit broader than just, I need a 5-year ROI on that X million of dollars that I'm going to spend.
Great presentation, Joe. For those that have been in the Navy, the seawater cooling is a fairly common topic,
Yeah.
but I really get inspired every time I see the review of what you've done. Been looking at it a lot the past couple months. Did you want to comment at all on Dean's comment about dollars per or transactions per KW or transactions cost? Is that a metric that you're pursuing, that tracking the way that Dean's looking at, or do you see a benefit in doing that?
Yeah, so I'm going to honestly sidestep that a little bit, and the reason is that all transactions may not be created equal, right? Like searching for a YouTube video or performing a Google index search or opening a Gmail attachment. Those are all transactions, but maybe they're not all created equal. So who's to say what useful work is, right? If you're the head of Gmail, opening that transaction is extremely useful work for all of your users. If you're the head of YouTube, watching that YouTube video is extremely useful work. So without kind of normalizing it to really what is useful work, I don't want to comment on that, but those are things that we're trying to tackle. More importantly, because we don't generally have dedicated infrastructure, we try and encourage all of our services to use shared infrastructure, shared services, so that we can increase the availability, increase the utilization of those assets. I want people to stop caring about individually at that cell basis what the transactions per kilowatt are. Let's look at it across the entire Google infrastructure. So these are some of the challenges that we're working on, and we don't have the right answers today.
Joe, the earlier slide, yeah, it's over here.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Earlier slide, you had a history of the Google data centers, and the last component, you had a certification. What kind of certification do you have? And also some thoughts about the certification in the US and also for the world, for the future, for the data
Those
center?
are ISO certifications. They're ISO 14001 and 18001. One is on your environmental program, and the other one is on your employee or occupational health and safety. So we've been certified to both those ISO standards at all of our operating production data centers right now. There's another one that we're just completing, so stay tuned. We'll be releasing information on that one also soon.
Just another question. Since the most of us at the Green Grid, part of us is working for SC39 PUE certification to be ISO numbers, but will be you are considering submitting like PUE number to be certified under ISO? It becomes ISO. Just
Yeah,
curious.
we've gone back and forth over this. A lot of internal discussion about whether we should. We do publish all of our PUE numbers for any data center that is in production for 6 months and has a load of 5 megawatts. We publish quarterly and annualized, trailing 12-month, as well as maximums and minimums. And we publish how we measure and the algorithms that we use to calculate. So we are publicly disclosing this. So what's the value of doing that? I can tell you anecdotally that we've gone into the DOE tool for, I forget exactly what they call that tool, but it's
DCEP's Data Center Pro.
That's right. And we've scored, you can go in there and do kind of some test runs, right? We've scored a couple of our data centers. Is it meaningful if I release scores of 100%? That's what they came out at. And so I'm not sure that what's being measured for the broader sense is really what we should really be targeting ourselves to. I think that there's more that we can do internally. So that's what I'm challenging the teams to. I don't want people to feel like, oh, we're at 100 points. That's the best it can be. I don't believe that. So.
I think we have one more question. Bob?
Bob Castellano, 7x24 Exchange. Joe, I have seen a trend of companies utilizing former industrial facilities or military installations because of the infrastructure left behind or the land use if they have aquifers on the land. It seems like Google has done some of that. Is that a strategy that you guys
Yeah, it's one of the components in our site selection overall strategy because it really comes down to how quickly can you get this site operational. If you have to go through a building permitting process and you have to go through public hearings and all that on it, you could be a year in just permitting. And then you have all your construction and fit out and all that time. So usually by reusing an existing building or an existing facility of some sort, you can cut that a lot. So it's not that we're out there saying we want to buy paper mills for all of our data centers, but it was a great opportunity, and we needed something in that region. It was, it met the cost targets, it met the time targets, it met the proximity to user-based targets. We analyzed the content on the grid, and when we analyze the content on the grid, how we compare site to site when you're trying to compare between 2 sites or 3 or 5, we apply a shadow carbon price based on the grid makeup to every site, and then that goes into our site selection process. So it really is about the overall holistic picture of what the right site is for us, but we're not opposed to, and we actually like to reuse existing infrastructure whenever possible, but I'm not saying that I'm always going to use existing infrastructure.
Site selection is also one of the subjects Joe's been helping us out on within the Green Grid. You're going to see another presentation on that, but using existing infrastructure, not just for existing facilities like a paper mill and cooling, but also available energy. Where's renewable energy? You heard one of the challenges that Joe said he had right at the top of his presentation, is he'd like to procure more renewable energy, and that has a big impact not only on site selection, but there's regulatory constraints that Joe, with Google and many others, are facing. So I want to thank Joe for his leadership here and for helping us out here at Forum. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Now, just to avoid the mistake I made last time, I'm almost positive we're going to a networking break and lunch right now. Am I right?
Yeah.
All right, good. So I think the networking break, the lunch, thanks. Yeah, small feats, they're really good. I think we're good for about 35, 40 minutes for the lunch break, and then we'll get back into session. During the lunch break, we have the technology activities table, so feel free, join whichever discussion group you think is most beneficial for you, and we'll see you shortly. Thanks.